We've only had PS5 for about a year and a half, and in that time, we've had our fair share of critical analysis on the console, like a 2 month review, a 1 year review, also comparing it directly to PS4. And, with all that said, I think I'm now to a point where, at least for me personally, I can confidently say I like PS5 a lot more than PS4 within the same time frame, and here's why. See, the thing is, whenever it comes to a brand new platform launch, and let's face it, it still feels relatively new right now where you can't buy a PS5 whenever you want. There's plenty of cross-gen games coming out, so yeah, it's current gen, but we are still in that transitionary period. And during that time, almost always, the default opinion, and it's not even so much a contrarian opinion, right? It's very sensible to say that you don't have to buy a PS5 right now. You don't have to get a Series S or an X, right? You can wait. And, 9.9 times out of 10, that is a very good piece of advice to follow, because over time the consoles will get cheaper, hardware revisions will come out where it's going to draw less power, it might be smaller, you're going to have the library grow and games are going to get cheaper. It's just almost always you're better off. But the thing is, with that new console syndrome, I don't know if that completely holds up 100%, right? You will be better off waiting, but buying today is still a really compelling case. Even in the situation where, like for PS5 right now, a big part of it is that for many people going from 4 to 5, there's the brand new UI, and with that, unfortunately, comes the situation where you're missing out on a lot of features that PS5 can't do that PS4 did. Now, for the Microsoft side of things, that might be a more easy transition when you go from, say, X1 to a Series S or an X. The UI is very familiar. A lot of features are carried over, and that's the benefit to going with the UI that does feel very familiar. On the PlayStation side of things, you are getting a brand new UI, but that comes with some drawbacks, and that's why there's always some pros and cons when it relates to going with a brand new UI or sticking with one that, just works. But that's besides the point. The thing is, in most other aspects, I find this generation has been off to an excellent start. And while in the same time frame versus PS4, Sony has been able to ship a ridiculously good lineup. I mean, so far we've got the Demon's Souls remake, Spider-Man Miles Morales, Sackboy Big Adventure, Returnal, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, Horizon Forbidden West, Gran Turismo 7, and sure, some of these games are also available on PS4, but when we are in the AAA game space, some of these games have dramatic differences. So, for example, Horizon, I cannot believe how bonkers that game looks on PlayStation 5. It really is just immaculate looking. And even more so when we are talking a strictly PS5 title. Not much holds a candle to the Demon's Souls remake or Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, but that's just purely speaking from visuals. These are still all great games across the board, and they do have native PS5 versions. Then there's more of these, in-between titles where you don't necessarily need them, but if you miss them on PS4, this is a great time to get them, like Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut, Death Stranding Director's Cut, Uncharted Legacy of Thieves Collection. These are the best way to play these games. We also see Sony doing strategic partnerships for things like Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade, Deathloop, Ghostwire Tokyo. Sure, those games will go to Xbox eventually. Now they're Microsoft properties, but it's something where Sony did align themselves with these games fairly early, and so they're here right now today on PS5, and they're totally worth playing. You've got these smaller experiences like Bugsnax or Kena Bridge of Spirits. Again, Sony wants to align themselves with these games, so they may go to other platforms eventually, and that's good, but right now there's still a lot of great things to play on PS5. If there's one thing everyone seems to remember really well, and I certainly do, it's that with PS4, it had a fairly slow start. Definitely a lot of positive energy going into it, but coming off the back of PS3, it was still, in terms of games, it was a slow start. And this is where PS5 is in a bit of a perfect storm situation. PS4 in many ways was the epitome of a new console. We're talking a completely new user interface, architecture, a renewed focus from Sony, and yes, no backwards compatibility. When you had a PS4 early on, coming off of PS3, you were more or less truly walking away from that old platform and that library, which in many ways is totally fine. I vividly remember so many complaints back then that PS4 didn't feel like that big of a jump compared to PS3, which in hindsight is a bit silly. We did get higher display resolutions, stable 30 FPS targets, and physically based rendering, and that all went a long way to make PS4 titles feel truly compelling compared to PS3. So it was indeed an alright thing for a lot of people to transition to PS4 so quickly and also abandon their PS3 library, which for a lot of folks they did. This time around, though, we've got diminishing returns, and those diminishing returns are making PS4 games stay as relevant as ever, especially when, if it's not some sort of AAA blockbuster as explained earlier, there's really not going to be a massive difference between the PS4 or PS5 versions, although granted, if you're playing on PS5 as a native PS5 game, you are getting very fast load times, very fast boot times. There might be support for the card system, trophy tracking, game help, also 3D audio, the adaptive triggers, haptic feedback. There's a lot of things that developers can do to really differentiate a PS4 or PS5 version in the event that a game isn't necessarily a visual showcase. And that's the really cool thing about playing any game on PS5, even more so if you're doing strictly a PS4 title without a native PS5 version. That's the point I'm trying to get at here, is that it was important this time around to have backwards compatibility. There's still a lot of reasons why you might be playing a PS4 game today, and if you do, playing it on PS5 has been excellent. This is where, in terms of actually playing older titles in the console space, we've never really had this before, where you're actually seeing boosted performance of older games without a native port. So PS4 games will almost always get pushed to their frame rate cap and load much faster on PS5. This is why I mentioned in my original PS5 review that even if you're not playing native PS5 games, then this is just a really good PS4 for the time being, and that shouldn't be seen as a bad thing. Games are games, and they're playing better than ever on PS5. What's not to love while you're waiting for those PS5 blockbusters, which, as we've mentioned, have already started releasing faster than what we saw on PS4? Then there's things like the free upgrades many publishers are offering. We've never had this kind of initiative in the console space before that's been this widely adopted. More so than the short-lived upgrade program from PS3 to PS4, if you remember that. That was around launch, and not many games supported that. But there was also the cross-buy program that was more widely used across Vita, PS3, and PS4, but still, in many cases, you've got a free upgrade path for a game that you might already own. Also, and I'm sure I might be sounding like a broken record at this point across many different videos, but it's true, the DualSense is excellent, and it's something where the DualShock 4 was great, absolutely for its time. It was a massive jump from DualShock 1 through 3, which was principally the same shell for 15-something years, but I don't think anybody really saw coming just how well the DualSense was going to be from coming off the DualShock 4, right? It's very comfortable, it's a well-built controller, and one where it has these more sensory features like the haptics and the triggers, which are genuinely fun and interesting to use, so much so that I do miss them when I play other platforms that is not, PlayStation 5. Now, I will mention, I've personally not had any issues with the sticks drifting. I know it's something where that's kind of a hot topic with the DualSense, and really most controllers nowadays, whether it's Joy-Cons, the Xbox controller, or the DualSense, we don't really have a good idea of just how widespread that problem tends to be. Some people have it right out of the box with the DualSense. Sometimes it's after a week, a month. I mean, I've got a lot of DualSense controllers. I feel like I play a good amount of games, and I've never ran into the issue whatsoever. I don't know anyone else who does. Obviously, that's just going off of anecdotal experience, but it's just something where, in an isolated situation, we have no idea how widespread it can be, because oftentimes when people run into problems, they will be more vocal about it instead of the millions of other people that are using their controllers and they play and work just fine. So your mileage is obviously going to vary greatly here. But anyway, it's for all these reasons that I'm liking PS5 a lot more already. And don't get me wrong, nowadays we've got a much different Sony compared to the one that shipped PS4 in 2013. My biggest concern has always been that Sony slips into a position of complacency like PS3. And look, they're not there yet. It's not that bad, but absolutely, they've deserved every bit of criticism for how they've been handling certain things lately. Most recently was Gran Turismo 7's launch with the microtransactions, but we also see that they've been quick to respond to these criticisms, like the PS3 and Vita store closures, or the Horizon upgrade path. They're willing to admit fault. I just hope it doesn't have to get to that point every single time we have one of these situations. But with Sony, we do see how aggressive they've been with trying to increase the average spend per customer. They are a business after all. I just hope they don't have this tunnel vision on extracting so much without realizing it's damaging an otherwise good lineup of products. Having said that, I think in terms of foundation, PS5 is off to a much stronger start, and that's why for me personally, I just like it a lot more. there's so much more to enjoy already in what is a short amount of time. And if you remember, I had a conversation like this a few years ago where I mentioned, here's why I like PS3 more than PS4. And, now it's starting to sound like I don't like PS4 at all. That's not true. I really enjoyed PlayStation 4 a lot, but going from 3 to 4, what I missed there was a lot of the more quirky aspects of PS3, not only the games, but things like, the XMB, the clean UI, managing files directly on the console, things like PS Home or folding at home or Eye Judgment, very unique aspects of PS3 that PS4 was not going to have, right? And that's what I missed. So it's not like PS4 did anything really bad here, but having PS4 for 7 or 8 years and now going to PS5, not having those things anymore, it's just, I'm not nearly as bothered by it anymore. And there are actually certain elements of PS5 that are reminiscent of PS3, very little things, but for example, the very clean UI. So PS5 might feel more isolating compared to PS4's, what's new section, but I like the clean UI. I like when games have a big picture that take over the entire screen and they play a music track from the game. I really like that, just like PlayStation 3. And 4 had that, but it was weird. You had to scroll down. It's just, there's certain elements of PS5 that are reminiscent of PS3, and I think that also helps a little bit more for me. But either way, PS4 is fantastic, but judging from Sony's really strong start with PS5, I'm feeling very bullish on the future, and we know there's so much coming up. So we'll surely revisit this in a few years and see if I still feel the same way, but if I had to guess right now, I think I will. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you haven't yet, please consider subscribing for the best PlayStation news, reviews, and updates that are here on YouTube. You can also follow me on Twitter at Mystic Ryan. And that is it. I will see you all in my next video. You take it easy.